a slew of events coming up. So we're rapidly delivering content, and take a look at this list. And definitely, we just encourage you to go to our website, listed at the bottom there. So those Tip It Back Tuesdays are every other Tuesday. One next week. We've got the next COVID track a week from today. There's an end user coffee connection. Those are every other Tuesday as well. And as you see, the list goes on. So please make sure you're saving CoreNet Chicago chapter as a favorite on your browser and check it for constant updates. And last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Turner-Locke, one of our program chairs, new to our board this year and phenomenal. And she's going to start the program with introductions on our speakers.
Thanks, Lauren. Can you guys hear me okay? Just get a head nod. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time from your day to join us. As Lauren said, I'm Heather Turner-Locke. I'm going to be your moderator today. I've led workplace strategy here at Epstein Union Architects. We're headquartered in Milwaukee, and I'm really passionate about culture, well-being, employee engagement, and really the role of real estate and design and how that plays a role in the conversation. As many of you know, I'm a super fan of CoreNet and have an honor of serving on this year's board of directors, as well as a co-chair of the programs committee with both Patrick and Jonathan. So before we dive in, I just want to give the panelists a few minutes to briefly introduce themselves, and maybe we'll start with Beth, since you're first up on the list.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Chulis, and I lead real estate and workplace experience for Toast. We are a pretty fast-growing technology company based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and we have been greatly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, both in terms of our business model, but also in terms of what it's meant for our employee population base. So lots to share on what we're doing. Also, I'm a lifelong corporate real estate professional. I've been doing this type of work for a number of different Fortune 100 companies, and really excited to be here.
Thank you, Beth. Dave.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Hupka. I work for a company called Rivian. We're a Milwaukee-based consulting firm, primarily LEED certifications, energy audits, well building certifications. We're here to make your building better. I've been involved in the industry for 20 years. I want to say about 15 years now. It's been specifically sustainability type work. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked in the health and wellness realm on various projects. Locally, coast to coast, and I've got quite a bit of experience working around the world with Mars Candy Factory. So I always tell my kids I work on the Willy Wonka machines around the world, and they get quite excited. So I've got some good experience from not only coast to coast, but what I'm hearing and seeing in other countries around the world with respect to COVID and their response and plans moving forward. So I'm happy to be on the panel and contribute to today's discussion.
Thanks, Dave. Hopefully you can bring out a golden ticket to us at some point. Marissa, you're up next.
Good afternoon. I'm Marissa Kalkman. I serve as the executive director for the Wellness Council of Wisconsin. Wellness Council of Wisconsin is a statewide nonprofit membership organization, and our mission is to serve and support the employers, all employers in Wisconsin, in developing and enhancing their strategies in the way of employee well-being. So how do we support them to support their people, essentially. And we do that. We are affiliated with the national organization, Wellness Council of America, also known as WELCOA, which some of you may be familiar. And we serve in all kinds of ways, best practices, consultation, certifications, education, an annual conference, and on and on. My background is in consultation. I've been a consultant in the global benefits space for many years, and then now here with the Wellness Council of Wisconsin since 2018. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. And Kelly, last but not least.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Renz. I'm the CEO and president of the Novo Group. The Novo Group is a Brookfield, Wisconsin-based talent consulting organization. We work with organizations all over North America on recruiting solutions, outsourcing, talent development, and executive coaching. You can imagine the amount of work we're doing right now with our clients on COVID and their workforce plans, communication strategies, as well as equipping leaders to be effective at these tumultuous times. We have individuals that are in 8 states, and we service clients across multiple industries. So from a smaller startup all the way through a Fortune 100. So we've gotten a chance to see a lot of the different perspectives going on right now in organizations of all sizes and backgrounds. So looking forward to sharing some of those best practices today. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Kelly. So the topic today, health and well-being, this is super important as we consider employees who not only are continuing to work from home, but are also those workplaces who are gearing up for entry, and then the workplaces that maybe have never been closed during this time. The role of real estate leadership continues to evolve, and the voices at that leadership table have grown as we navigate these times for organizations. So we really hope that today's program will provide you with some broader knowledge as you lead these conversations within your organizations or for your clients. You know, when I say health and well-being, just saying those 2 words, it just really takes on an individual meaning for me, and I'm sure it takes on an individual meaning for all of you. And if we took a poll of the audience, I bet we would all define it slightly different. So for today's conversation, I just want to keep the idea of health and well-being very holistic. It can be about the way that we're caring or planning for the psychological well-being of our fellow employees. It may venture into the physical safety as we protect our team's health. And it might also take a look a little bit at the new behaviors that we're starting to see emerge. So again, keeping that holistic lens on the topic of health and well-being. So Marissa, I would love to start with you. I know you work with organizations on their wellness strategies, helping them maybe define it even. How has COVID placed a wider lens on employee health and well-being from your perspective?
Yeah, so this has been the holistic definition of wellness or well-being that you just introed has been an evolving conversation for many of our organizations that we serve over the last year or 2 especially. And I think I can confidently say that with COVID, with this global pandemic and the many facets of impact that it's having, it is just further amplifying the recognition from the groups that we're working with that wellness or well-being, whichever term you really choose, is very, very much holistic and multidimensional. I think there's kind of 2 models that we talk a lot about with our organizations, 2 models of or definitions, if you will, of well-being. And one is WellCoa's definition that actually defines these 7 different components. Physical, which is physical health, which is both physical, your body as well as your mind, your mental health. Meaning is a component of wellness. Safety, from both the physical safety side as well as psychological safety. That's the 3rd component. Connection, the need for interconnectedness with fellow humans, is a called out component in this model. Achievement, growth, and then the 7th is resiliency. So your ability to really work through times of challenge, times of whether it's personal, professional, or global challenge like COVID is bringing on. So that's one model that I think is really taking off in the conversations with our employees, because there are these parts and pieces that maybe have been neglected in the way that employers or organizations view wellness. I think one more thing I'll mention that we're certainly seeing with organizations we're working with that's been amplified by COVID is the wide-ranging topic of mental health, and I think it's a really important amplification of the need for focus and understanding and stigma-free communication and support for mental health. COVID, I think, is kind of this great equalizer, if you will, that mental health is real. We're seeing from Mental Health America, a nonprofit organization that truly serves mental health support services across the nation. They have sets of self-assessment tools on their website that are free for any individual to go utilize. And they've seen a 20% increase in that tool, in that self-assessment tool, from February through April. If that's not telling I'm not sure what is. And so I think that's really trickling into the conversations again that we're having with employers and their recognition of the need to support their employees maybe differently than they have in the past, and to widen their lens of what wellness can be and what their wellness support can be for their people.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up in terms of just putting more of a lens on mental health in general. You know, as we look to return to the workplace, there's more of an increased fear and anxiety among employees, which clearly has a negative impact on even our immune systems. How are your organizations or clients' organizations connecting with employees on this front? Are you tackling it head on? Maybe Beth or Kelly, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, it's Beth. I can chime in on that. So the average age of a Toast employee is somewhere between 25 to 27 years old. So for most companies, I think the average age is, 30 plus. And so our population are a bunch of employees that are relatively new, out of, graduating from school, or relatively young. The demographic is they, live in urban centers. They take public transportation to and from work, and coming into work is as much about a social interaction as it is about, delivering results, right? We really believe we deliver results through the social interaction. So the COVID-19 has presented a host of really unique challenges for our employee base, because they associate culture with workplace. And so that's one thing that we've really had to work through. We did a survey of our employees about 2 weeks ago, asking basically how they felt about coming back into the office, what were they worried about, what were they concerned about. And the first thing that I just want to share is that we had around 70% participation on the survey. So, a topic that is really super important to our employee base. And there were a couple of really interesting themes that kind of came out of this that I think it's really important to share. One is they want to continue to work from home. As much as coming into the office and they associate themselves with workplace and what that does for them from a social perspective, the richness for us came in some of the verbatim comments. One comment was, "I am worried we will be required to return to the office before I feel comfortable." So employees are really uncomfortable with the idea of coming back into the office. They're concerned that they're going to get sick from a fellow employee, and they're concerned not only about what Toast is doing to keep them safe, but they're worried about things they don't have control over, like what is my building doing to keep me safe as well. And so, and then the third thing they're worried about is commuting, right? And one of the things that I don't think companies do enough of, and we talked about it just with the panel originally, is I don't think employees know what their new normal is going to be like. I think they think they're going to come back in and they're going to be sitting around having a beer at 5 o'clock with their fellow employees. That is not what's going to happen, right? You're going to have to check in every morning and certify yourself. You're going to have to then walk to work because you can't take public transportation. You're going to have to wait 45 minutes for an elevator. Then I'm going to meet you at the door with a mask and tell you to go sit in a corner. And then you're going to be on Zooms all day, continuing to have meetings because you can't go into conference rooms. And then at 5 o'clock, when you try to have a beer, I'm going to say you have to social distance and you can't drink a beer through a mask. So and once they look at you, they're like, okay, why would we ever come back, right? And I think there's going to come a time where they want to, because equally on the other side of things, our employees said, I am not going to work from home indefinitely. I'll work from home 2, 3, 4 days a week, but I am not going to work home 100% of the time, because we're social creatures. It's how we identify with our culture. So really important insights coming out of our survey, and have really materially advised how we think about what we do to support our employee population.
So Kelly, in your line of work, are you advising some of your clients on surveying, and how is that going?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Surveys have been a really important part of collecting the feedback. you know, it's dangerous to assume we know what our teams want. Just because we may have an inkling or an understanding, or we have a cultural norm that we think we can lean on. COVID has changed a lot of those norms. You know, the attitudes and the feelings and the fears are real. And until you get the chance, give your people the chance to give you the feedback, you're not going to necessarily know. So, you know, to Beth's point, is giving them that voice, giving them some options. And in addition to the surveying process, some people are also still nervous even about surveying. They want to talk to somebody. They want to connect with somebody. So if you're a small organization, that might be easier to manage. If you're a large organization, maybe you have to set up a central point where employees can reach out and say, you know, I've got some unique individual personal situations that are impacting my, my answers to wanting to return to work. Can I talk to somebody? And then capturing the information so that you have a better whole look. You know, that one size fits all return to work strategy is probably not going to work for a lot of organizations. As much as it would make leadership jobs easier if everything was the same, it's going to be a long time before everything's the same again. And taking a look at those needs of individuals, giving the flexibility, taking into account personal and individual circumstances. If there was ever a time to connect with your people one-to-one, this is the time to get to know and understand. And here's another thing, if you surveyed them like 6 weeks ago, they might feel different today. So make sure that as you're making decisions that you're working with really relevant current information, because boy, has this taken people through a roller coaster of emotions mentally, and they have family situations that have emerged since the last time we surveyed them. So just make sure you're working with really, really current information. Then take a look at your plans. But you know, that one size fits all is going to be a hard one for any of us to tackle.
That's great advice, Kelly. Thanks. What other best practices are we seeing or advising to alleviate some of the concerns the employees are having?
Well, I can share.
Kelly, yeah.
I'm happy to share a couple. You know, I mean, honestly, giving people choices for a period of time. Sure. It doesn't have to be indefinite. You can create checkpoints. So if somebody doesn't want to return to work, they've got, you know, the public transportation concerns, and then just all the logistics of getting to work. Put in increments of check-ins. You know, you don't have to make a decision today that you aren't going to open your office till January 1st. I think sometimes we as leaders think we have to make these really big decisions and that are absolute. As long as you're communicating with your employees and saying, look, this is going to be iterative. You know, we're going to make these decisions in steps. So this decision is good for 30 days. We'll let you know in advance. Letting them know what to expect about your decision-making process will take some of the guesswork out. So that's one of the best practices we're seeing, is do this in increments, do it phased. For organizations, this is also the time to step back and look at your people and how did they perform? What happened in your business? Who stepped up as a leader in this time? You know, who filled the gaps? Who is shining through? Who struggled? Do you have the right organizational structure still in your leaders about coming back to work? I can't tell you how many conversations we're having about companies looking at reorganizing. Just like the Great Recession a decade ago, we saw it then as well. You know, organizations that get stressed, leaders will either rise or not. And now is the time to look at that to make sure you've got your strongest leaders out front, in front of your employees as well. So those are a couple of things. Don't make absolute decisions forever. Make sure you've got the right people leading.
Yeah, that's some great insight, because I could say even at our firm, we've kind of taken a different approach. We're having more of an organic re-entry. But I would say 6 weeks ago, I think our minds were more around, well, should we do a phased approach? So it is interesting to stay in tune with where everyone's at and then be able to be flexible as well around this.
Absolutely.
Dave, maybe in your line of work, can you speak to maybe some of the things that you can do to kind of help alleviate some of that, you know, anxiety, or help, you know, boost the psychological security in employees?
Unmute there. Yeah, absolutely. So when this all hit back earlier in the year, I went through all the lead rating systems, the well building standard, and I kind of had an aha moment. I thought, wow, there's really not a credit or something written to reduce or eliminate the spread of germs. So I started to collect resources and read up on the things. And now everybody has something to say about what should be done or what can be done. And we spoke earlier this week about that psychological element, the psychological security of people still being uncomfortable to return to the office and what we can do in that aspect. And I thought back to my experiences over my life. And I remember years ago, me and my wife went to Utah up in the mountains, and we took a hike. And I'm terrified of heights. And we were walking way up on this pretty tight path, and people were walking toward us. And I stopped and hugged the rock. And my wife said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "There's people, they're gonna push me off the mountain." And she's like, "No, they're not." "Yeah, they are." So why did I do that? I don't know. It was just my fear of heights and the fear of the unknown. And that can also, come to the surface for folks that are being forced to come back into the office and say, "Hey, look, we did all of this, now come back to the office." Well, I might not be ready yet. So one thing that's newly created by the U.S. Green Building Council, it's what's called a Human Experience Performance Certificate. There's 2 pilot credits that are named Safety First, cleaning and disinfecting your space, and also re-entering your workspace. And what the U.S. Green Building Council is really good at is pointing to other experts in the world to say, here's the policies, here's the plans, here's the procedures that are considered best practices. If you implement them, we'll review them as a third party and prove to the best of your ability that the building is safe and ready to be re-entered. Is it going to be the silver bullet? Maybe not, but it will give some third party award or review of the policies and plans and procedures that have been put in place by the building staff, the operations, the tenants, so on and so forth. So we're starting to roll it out to a couple of buildings in Atlanta, some on the West Coast, potentially in Chicago. And it's just a third party, hey, we reviewed your operations and we believe these are best practices. But once again, survey your tenants and survey them regularly. And internally, we're not forcing anybody to go back to work at any time soon. And we've always joked that since you work all over the world, we've always asked, why do I have to go to the office? All my calls are teleconference. And now it's like, well, why do we have to go to the office? Why can't you work from home? So this has really flipped our questions internally to Rivian. So that's what we're seeing.
You know, on the topic of psychological security, so I'm here at our offices in Milwaukee, and we have a lot of behavioral cues set up for us. So we've got spray bottles and wipes over my shoulder. There's signage over here on the doors that basically tell me which way to walk. So behavior, let's talk a little bit about that. I'm interested in kind of what new behaviors maybe you guys are teeing up or seeing being teed up in the workplace or the return back to the workplace. And anyone can really take this question head on here.
Happy to jump in on the training component, if you will. So companies are getting really good at those physical cues, right? You know, setting things out, having the stations, signage. But there's one thing that we're catching is a miss, and it's one that we just tend to overlook. It's what are the cultural behavioral expectations, and training leaders to help communicate it. So, you know, people right now aren't hugging each other, right? If you're a hugger, this is a really hard time for you.
This is very hard.
Yeah, exactly. Or shaking hands, or, you know, fist bumping people and stuff like that. Right now, people are not quite sure what to do. And we have these natural behaviors that have been with us for our whole lives. So all of a sudden we have everybody coming back and they look at each other and like, what am I supposed to do? Tell people. Here in our organization is how we're going to greet each other. This is one of the ways we think that we can culturally make sure that, you know you're able to be friendly with people. Give people the permissions, train the leaders to help coach it, have a little fun with it where you can, where it's appropriate. But when you let people kind of wobble in that awkward place, that's actually where anxiety gets jacked up. And it's really important to spend some time, teach your leaders, like, okay, if you're going to do that elbow bump, which I'm not really an elbow bump person myself either, but if that's what you do, or if it's just how you greet each other, and then help leaders with the cues of reminding people without embarrassing them. That's another thing. I was with a client in a manufacturing facility, and I was from afar, but there was a supervisor that was kind of embarrassing one of the employees by catching them in a moment of wanting to go say hello to, kind of hug another employee that they hadn't seen. And it shocked both employees. And it's like, ooh, there's opportunity for us to train our managers and our leaders about how to coach their teams back in as well. Again, have a little fun with it, but that cultural dynamic is going to be actually more stressful than did I use the sanitizer in the kitchen, right? It's going to be how did I treat my fellow employees and how did I feel they treated me? So the headspace around what's acceptable social standards is something you can't ignore as part of your protocols.
Sure. This reminds me of the book Radical Candor. You know,
Exactly.
just to have some radical candor in the office. If you haven't checked it out, you should check it out. It's a great book.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. There's a couple things that we are doing that I think have really helped the population. So I think what's challenging is everybody wants to help out, be empathetic, reach out to other people, but it's just an unfamiliar place for everyone, right? Like if you're used to hugging, if you're used to high-fiving, if you're used to congregating groups of, you know, a gazillion people, what does that new normal look like? And I think we as leaders have to create those platforms for people to be able to do that. So we've done a couple of things I think have been really successful. One is we've started something called Thankful Thursdays. And Thankful Thursdays, we've created a platform for everyone to say something that they are thankful for a coworker has done for them, or for something that they just want to recognize in a virtual format. And then we have all hands meetings every couple of weeks. And then some of these items are shared amongst the population. And it becomes a really good virtual platform for keeping that empathetic engagement kind of moving forward and recognizing this is kind of who we are as toasters right now. We call ourselves toasters. So I think that's something that's super cool. We also have something that we send out on Monday. We call it the Toast Virtual Kitchen Counter. And so this is a way of talking about ways that toasters can connect and engage with each other. And so, so we have another session called Toasting Toasters. So you can come and show up with your beverage of choice and just sit around in a virtual chat room and engage with each other. And it doesn't have to be for anything meaningful or, anything, that is work related. It's just a way of connecting with each other in a virtual climate that fills that void of people being in the office and keeping that culture aspect moving forward. The last thing that I'll say is I think it's really important for leaders to be their authentic selves. And I think this was Kelly's point, if you come in and say, I know what this plan is going to be, then you're just kidding yourself. Let's be clear. The pandemic is in charge. We are not. And your employees can see through that a gazillion miles away if you're not open and honest with them about what you're doing. Like I presented our all hands on Tuesday, and I'm like, okay, here's what we're doing over the next 30 days. But I'm just going to tell you right now, that is completely subject to change, right? And so we're gonna support you better in a work from home environment because I know I can do that. I don't know what the future is going to hold when it comes back to coming into the office, because even if we open up the office, I don't know how 3/4 of you are going to get there because you all take public transportation. So I just think you need to give yourself permission to be vulnerable right now, right, with your employee base, and they will appreciate it.
Dave, did you have any other further thoughts? I saw you unmute there.
Yeah, no, I agree with all the comments and the points, but I think to expand it outside the workplace, outside of buildings, what's our culture going to look like post-COVID? I mentioned on our call earlier this week that I was in Sendix over the weekend, and a woman had her arms full of groceries because I don't think she wanted to touch a cart or a basket. And as she was pulling up to check out, one of her groceries fell on the floor. And I was going to pick it up, but then I looked at her and she looked at me and I said, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to use my sleeve, or is there a 5-second rule in COVID, or what do we do here? And we both looked at each other like, I don't know. So it's not just, the workplace, it's everywhere. And I think it's going to have to, like the other panelists had said, is every week, every month, reevaluate what our plans and policies and procedures are, get feedback from our tenants, our employees, and it's going to be a work in progress. I mean, we don't know what the future is going to hold, but I think now is the time to have open and honest conversations and full transparency as we move forward.
Yeah, to your point, Dave, I was at a socially distanced event last night. It was at a drive-in movie theater. And, I have pretty close relationships with all these people on a personal level. It was so hard to not hug, and we felt like, should we hug? Should we not hug? What do we do? And I know there's research out there that there's 4 types of distances that people like to maintain, and you've got, you know, intimate is 0 to 18 inches, personal is 18 inches to 4 feet, but then the social relationship is more of that 8 to 10 feet, and then public is more, you know, 10 plus. And so I think about just the trust within the work environment and really not having that ability to get that closeness. Are you guys seeing any of the technology platforms or even physical things that we're doing within the environment to help bridge that gap for the time being? I mean, Beth, you kind of talked a little bit about some of these social events. Kelly or Dave or Marissa, any companies that you're working with where you're seeing that, you know, really dig into the culture?
I can speak a little to some of the physical things that we're seeing companies do to help maintain that. I mean, it's what you'd expect, of course. You know, it's reconfiguring, taking seats out of different places. When you force an employee or somebody to make a choice of where they have to go to sit or what is appropriate, you're introducing that anxiety, right? Like, what's the right thing to do? It's kind of like Dave just said, do I pick up the grocery or not? So if you take, like, if you have a conference room and you are going to meet in person, and there's a lot of organizations that have started to move back into that, take out the number of seats you don't want filled, put a little piece of tape on the floor, whatever you have to do. It doesn't always have to be a high cost option, but make it so that it's the way you want it to be when they come in. That way people aren't saying, am I supposed to sit next to this person, or is it 2 seats away? Take the guesswork out. You know, have people's materials moved. If you have to move them in their office space, if you have a cubicle or a very open environment, help move them before they have to do it themselves. You know, if you're now going to space every other or whatever, just do that and help that for them. That's important. If you don't want people sitting in the lunchroom, put the chairs away. You know, so don't give them those moments of question marks. So that's one of the things that seems to be, it's like well, of course, but we kind of forget that because we're so busy with other things. So give them those options.
I would add, there's a particular member that I can think of, one of our members that we work with, that is being really intentional, kind of, Kelly, to your point around those physical cues, they're being really intentional in the language that they're choosing to use when communicating with their employees. So one specific phrase that they're really working hard to avoid is the phrase "back to work," and instead they've kind of adopted this phrase of "forward to work." So and then building a lot of their communication and their interaction with their employees in preparing them for, you know, we're not going back. We're not going to go back to the way it was. It's going to look and feel different. And, you know, here's how that's going to look and feel different. But really adding kind of that positive emphasis that we're forward to work. We're going to eventually get back to being together in some form or fashion. It's just not going to look the same way. And so just, again, using really intentional language when they're speaking to their people.
Yeah, and for those of you who kind of have either employees coming back or working with clients who have employees coming back, I mean, what are the biggest areas of concern? You know, is it specific things? Like, I don't have access to certain things. What does that look like?
I'm happy to share. We've heard, so first of all, a kitchen area seems to be one of the kitchen and the restrooms, these public areas, but, you know, organizations that no longer make, like, the refrigerator available for community sharing. What do people do with their food? Where do they put it? Is it, you know, if they can't use the microwave then, and so what do you do about all of those types of things that people had come to depend on as the creature comforts of being at work? If you want to be able to eat lunch, how are you going to accommodate that? So we have found the biggest objections were the coffee pots, taking away the coffee pots, because you have everybody touching everything. You've got, you know, in the kitchen appliances, it's amazing how quickly that is. The other is the copier and printer, you know, so everybody's touching it. So how do you create a touch-free or germ, you know, transfer-free process? And then, of course, restrooms, just because that's hard, because if you're in a multi-tenant building, while one business might be able to control what's going on in their walls, you've got other tenants who are interacting in that space. That seems to be one of the higher challenge as well. But that kitchen area is going to be probably one of the harder things to navigate.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I have done some webinars the last few weeks, and I've always spoken about turning buildings environmentally invisible, make them positive or carbon energy neutral. But now we're starting to put together webinars and talks on making buildings touchless. So no door handles, no elevator buttons, no light switches, like you said, no coffee pots, no printer where you touch. Everything has to be touchless on top of all the social distancing. What's interesting is our customer around the world is everything's open office from the CEO down. Even Mr. Mars has a cubicle. So they're starting to rethink, how do we go back to work in these offices when they're literally sitting right next to each other? They don't have anything figured out yet, but they're starting to look at what they're going to do to make these buildings touchless, social distance, and start to present different office space ideas that's not open office sitting right next to your colleagues. So it's a complete shift, complete change.
Yeah, so let's pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about Zoom fatigue. I know that by the end of the day, I kind of get it, and it is very draining on someone's well-being. As organizations look to go back, do you guys believe that we'll continue Zooming while we're at the office, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so we were a pretty heavy Zoom user prior to this, closing down a lot of our offices. I mean, we're a technology company, so we leveraged Zoom quite a bit beforehand. I think we've kind of taken it to new levels. We actually had an open mic night via Zoom a couple of weeks ago that was an incredible hit. It was just, people are like, when are you bringing back open mic night? But that's just something we've always done at Toast. So I think, and we're also big users of Slack as well. So one of the things we did to make Zoom fun is we actually started a Slack channel that's called Best Zoom Backgrounds. And so people are posting incredibly creative backgrounds on Zoom, to kind of put some fun into it, so that you don't get so fatigued by just, staring at 30 people on a screen all day. But I think, I will tell you that although we're not going to be 100% work from home, I think one of the things that we've acknowledged is that we have to get better with virtual collaboration tools, because we are shifting more towards a greater percentage of our population working from home at any given time. So it's one of the things we're acknowledging and trying to figure out, how do you create etiquette and protocols around this? Because even in the short term, as I mentioned, people that are coming back into the office are still going to be using Zoom for a lot of their meetings, because they can't go into a conference room with 6 people anymore. So, I think, whether it's you're on Teams or webinars or Zoom or whatever your technology platforms of choice are, I think it's going to be a bigger portion of the offering, because you're now talking about truly a distributed workforce, right? You're not talking about 4 regions. You're talking about work anywhere, anytime, any place. And you have to think differently about how you engage people through that process. We've just started a wellness offering for competitions where we're getting into step challenges, and leveraging the entire population. Our CEO just threw out a step challenge to everybody, and we're leveraging technology. And we've got leaderboards and so forth. These are the ways I think you have to think about leveraging technology to infuse your culture and bring it forward.
I love where you're going with that. On the topic of additional well-being offerings, what are you seeing aside from the step challenge or things of that nature?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of technology offerings helping companies manage, opening back up their offices. There's a big discussion topic right now of, do you test on site or do you have your employees certify? We're a company that really values our employees' privacy, so we're leveraging technology to help them through a check-in process. They're going to have to do it every day, but we're going to say to our toasters, you certify yourself every day. We'll create the technology that preserves your privacy, but that's part of the way for managing technology. We're also looking at leveraging our IWMS platform as a way of managing through the social distancing that's available out there. I'd like to link everything together so I know who's coming in on any given day and use that to leverage capacity, but we're not yet there yet. I just think with every one of our technology vendors right now, everyone's coming up with technology solutions to help companies better manage this process. I just don't know I don't think anybody knows which ones are the ones that are going to rise to the top, but everybody's doing it right now.
So I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 15 more minutes. I'm going to toss one more question out to this group. And I would say to the audience, if there's any specific questions you have for our panelists, please put them into the group chat and Patrick will funnel those at the end. But none of us have a crystal ball. But if we were to assume, let's just say a year out from now, next summer, there's a vaccine, people are back to the workplace. I'm a glass half full kind of gal. When you consider the ways employees will further support health and well-being for their employees, what do you think are those ways? Is it programs? Is it physical environments? What does that look like? So I'm looking for predictions, one from each of you. It's recorded, but we don't need to show this part of the recording, maybe. Go. Marissa, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I think where we'll be even more so is relating back to how we opened this really is, defining and thinking about and supporting employees and your people in a really holistic way when it comes to wellness and well-being. So thinking beyond maybe what's been traditionally supported in the way of physical health and fitness and nutrition and things like that, those are really important. And I think they'll continue to be, foundational to supporting people, of course, in well-being efforts. But I see this as just such an opportunity for people to really open their mind and think about well-being in a wider lens. Absolutely. So I think one thing that I'm really optimistic about, again, alluded to this earlier, I think that we are going to see people having open, honest, candid, compassionate conversation and communication and support for mental health and psychological safety in their organizations, and coming forward with that proactively, as opposed to maybe how traditionally it's been more reactive. Well, oh, you have a problem, here's the EAP, and kind of flipping that around really intentionally to say, we're an organization that openly supports and cares about your mental health and well-being, and here are kind of all the parts and pieces that we do to support you. So I see that as a really positive, optimistic prediction for how things will change.
Dave, you want to jump in here with your prediction?
Yeah, so the crystal ball prediction, I like what was mentioned about being proactive rather than reactive. I mean, heck, I'm glass half full with wine or beer, and I'm very positive we'll get through this. Will be a vaccine, but I don't think any of this is ever really going to go away with disinfectant wipes, different design and operations of buildings. I travel quite a bit around the world, and there's a lot of airports out there where most of the people are wearing face masks. And I always thought, I wonder why they're doing that. And I bet you now, coast to coast, we'll see in the next 5, 10, 20 years, people probably will still be wearing some type of face masks. So I'm very positive we'll get through this, but my prediction is it will never be out of the culture that was woven into our fabric so deeply. And I think we're going to move forward and be proactive, and that proactive is going to really cut deeper than it ever has before with prevention of germ spread and such.
Kelly, I'm going to toss it to you.
Yeah, I think we're going to see and feel the impacts from a cultural perspective in our businesses after this. That, number one, this experience really put all of us at all levels and organizations on an equal playing field. And this environment of being virtual and whatnot also has created a little bit of, I'll call it the de-leveling in organizations. It's created also a chance to be more vulnerable. I mean, I think about the Zoom meetings that I've been on and that our teams are on, and our clients. you're starting to see the whole person, right? You see that they're in their home office like me. You know they've got kids and pets and crazy stuff going on in their house, just like everyone else. We all became, those with younger kids became teachers on top of it. It created a humility and it created a vulnerability that I think that our organizations are going to try to hold on to some of that, because I think there's a lot more candid communication, sharing, and acceptance of the differences. You know, that whole leave your emotions at the door thing is just, first of all, we're human beings. We can't do that. I don't know how anybody can expect us to do that. So I think we're seeing employees now as the whole person and our colleagues. And I think that if we can hold on to that lesson learned, I think we'll see a lot more genuine environments, and to the other points where we're more accepting. So if you're looking at your D&I, you know, and the belonging strategies, boy, is this a great place to start.
Love that. Thanks, Kelly. Beth.
It is no longer going to be acceptable to come to the office sick. It's just I feel like everybody, it was almost, people almost wore it like a badge of honor, you know, coming into the office. There will be no badge of honor. There will not be a badge of honor. And I think that people are going to be super aware of it. And there's just this greater sense of tolerance. You know, the kind of people aren't going to come into work sick anymore kind of hit me at the last minute. But I'll be honest with you guys. I have no idea what's around the corner. I really don't know. I think, you know, who would have known, you know, that everybody could pivot on a dime and work from home in a very productive way in a matter of days. That's never ever happened before. So, you know, I think it's really important right now for everyone to be super observant about what's happening around you. I think this idea of, and I don't know if it was Kelly or maybe Marissa said this, about a race to get to your work from home or your reentry plan is kind of almost like a fool's errand right now. I would much rather wait and see how things develop over the summer and even through the fall, and then learn from what's worked really well and not so well, than put out these artificial dates only to have to pull them back because the pandemic is in control. We are not. And so, you know, that's kind of what I think. I think the days of people coming to work sick are over.
And I'm going to throw one in there just because I can't help myself, but we've talked about the one size does not fit all. And I believe that going forward, we're going to definitely see on the physical side of things that one size fits all, even on the design side, is really going to probably take hold a little bit more. Really trusting our employees, empowering them to make choices for where and how they work best, I think is going to be a little bit more amplified. That's my prediction. So, well, thank you, everyone. Patrick, I'm going to throw it over to you to see if there's any questions from the audience.
Yeah, there's none in chat yet. So at this point, if you have a question, unmute yourself to ask. But I'll open it by just saying thank you. What a great perspective. I think we've all been on a lot of these Zoom calls, and we come at it from the operations perspective, right? How do we open our buildings? What kind of PPE equipment do we need? And this is really the first time I've been on a Zoom call or in conference call with respect to COVID, where we're really looking at it through the lens of the employee and what makes them feel better coming back to the office, which is why we do the work we're doing, right? We just kind of forget that we might be doing it for those reasons. And I was going to make the point, Heather, like you just did with this one size fits all. I don't think that's going to be acceptable any longer. A big company like ours, it's very easy to, here's the policy and roll it out to everyone because we've got, you know, a couple 100,000 employees across the country and the world. But I think we're going to really have to take a step back. And as we were preparing for this panel earlier in the week, I asked the question, well, what about the at-risk or high-risk populations, right? And I think there's a lot of information out there, and we try to boil that down and create a policy or make a decision based on it. But from your perspective, how do we treat employees who say, I am not comfortable coming back to an office at this point in time, and I don't know if I ever will be? Is there an HR related, type of initiative that needs to be put into place for those types of employees?
I'm happy to answer that, since that's the space that I play in all the time. I hate to use the "it depends," but here's the rule of thumb we've been sharing with our clients and our teams. Number one, don't make a policy if you don't have to. Policies usually come out of something having gone really wrong. So instead, assume it's going to go right, and find a way, and instead a procedure to deal with it. Okay, so give an employee a place to raise that concern. You look at their individual job. Is it an accommodation that can be made? If it can, why not? If it's difficult, ask yourself the next level question is, how could we versus why can't we? Keep going down the problem solving path with the best of intention to try to accommodate those fears. Now, if it ultimately comes down to a situation where they're unable to perform their job because they have to return to work, you do have the ability to make a change there if you have to. But seek counsel on that. But obviously, there's a path where some jobs require it, and if that's the case, that's the conversations you have. But just take it in increments and avoid giant policies, and that's where companies get in trouble, and that's where employees get resentful.
Thank you. That's great perspective.
You guys were talking a little bit, I think, Beth, on the multi-tenant building side, and there's this cultural alignment, and how are those conversations going between landlords and tenants, when it comes to coordinating kind of if there is a return? And I know you're taking your time with that, but are those conversations kind of ongoing, and what does that look like?
Yeah, they, there are certain landlords that, gosh, a month ago, I had a complete playbook from all of our landlords on what they were planning on doing in the building. Some of them are a little bit less developed, right? And part of the work that we're doing right now is, how do we have to supplement what the landlord is not doing? Right? Because
Sure.
we're gonna make sure that our employees are safe. And if that means going above and beyond, so be it. That's what we have to do. But I also think it's making people aware of what people are doing. So one of the things we're doing a formal training for everybody before they come back into the office. They have to take a mandatory 2-hour training where we go through everything that the building is doing, everything that Toast is doing, and everything that's their responsibility as well. And so, because I think one of the problems or one of the challenges that employers are having right now is assuming too much responsibility for everyone being perfectly 100% safe in the office. And that's an unrealistic expectation to set with your employee base. And I think if you say to your employees, we're going to do all of this, but here's the things that you have to do to make sure that you are safe, but also maintain the safety of your coworkers. I think it's really important to do that, because otherwise you're going to set a false expectation with your employees that is a promise you just can't keep.
So are there any questions from our audience today? I'm just going to take a pause here for a minute. Got about 3 more minutes left. We don't want to cut you short.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Do you think there's going to be a complete overhaul of people's existing office space to have social distancing and redoing cubes that may go back to offices? And then the second piece to that is what we've seen is some users wanting to be in a new building with new HVAC systems. So could this be a positive for the real estate industry where they see new construction?
Yeah, so I can say, so from a company perspective, we are not investing a huge amount of capital into our facilities immediately. what we're going to be doing is we're looking for ways of running shift work, looking for employees that need to be in the office, and then using the space that we have and seeing how it goes. Because like you could invest a whole bunch of money in terms of taking out and reconfiguring and adding more walls or whatever. And I'm not sure anybody knows if that's going to work or not. So we're, you know, I think most companies I've spoken to are doing this, right? They're going to do shift work. They're going to use what they have. They'll take out chairs out of conference room. They'll take out every other chair in their, you know, in their cubes, and they'll reassign based on what they have right now. And that will set the capacity. And then they got to figure out how to manage their employee base on the capacity side.
And Dave, I don't know if you want to address, do you have any knowledge on the HVAC side of things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There may be more demand or asking about, you know, the UV lights or the carbon filters that, you know, can get much more of the particulates out of the air. I would assume people would be more comfortable in brand new buildings than going into existing buildings. But I also think that, you know, with the workforce, there's going to be that work from home element and the shift, you know, work in different shifts or different days. So there might not be a need for as much floor area as we're all used to. You know, time will tell. I know in our office, it's primarily open office, but we're going to start to put people into, you know, different conference rooms if we're there together, or say, you know, these people work Monday through Wednesday, and these people work Thursday, Friday, and start to figure out how we don't have to fill up the office all at one time. So a lot of these discussions are happening, but in answer to your question, that's kind of in the crystal ball category, because we just don't know where the market's going to turn to next, but we're definitely having those discussions now. And back to, you know, Heather's point is, if we get a vaccine and this all goes back to normal sooner rather than later, we still may have these precautions here, but it might not move that real estate market like we might expect it to if this continues to grow.
Yeah, and just a quick follow up. A lot of my clients, Andrew, are they're wait and see, kind of hold tight pattern right now. So I do want to respect the time. There's one quick question, Patrick. Should we grab that quick question, or do you want to? Something about. Go ahead.
I see it. What plans are in place if there's a COVID case with a return to work employee? Does everyone exposed need to quarantine from them? Good question.
The practices right now, short answer is yes. You know, there's contact tracing that's attempted. You know, who did they come in contact? Who did they work near? What did they touch? That's not foolproof, as we all know. That's kind of that's basic and it's expected. The best practice we're seeing is that individual and the immediate work teams that can be identified in the company do go into a quarantine time period. We see a range of 10 to 14 days for the quarantine period. So that is something that we're seeing happen, and it happens fast. It's done, go, and don't delay. So the responsiveness is very quick. We're seeing this a lot, for example, in manufacturing, you know, office facilities as well, because of the close quarters. So the answer is yes, as inconvenient as it is.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you all the panelists for taking the time today. This was really helpful. Patrick, I'm going to throw it to you or Lauren to kind of close us out.
Yep, I'll take it, and thank you all. This was great. And please tune in. The next 3 weeks we'll have same time on Thursdays with different topics. Next week is real estate and deal making. The one following that is something that someone just brought up, and that's the future of office design. And then following that will be our last in our series, which will discuss kind of a look back, and we'll have a little bit of an international spin. So mark your calendars for every Thursday at 1 o'clock from today going forward the next 3 weeks. And we'll see you at another upcoming event. Thank you all, and we'll close out.
Thank you.
Thank you.